Hello, I'm Tony Gittins. I'm the director of the Washington, DC International Film Festival. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was a very important civil rights movement in the fight against discrimination in this country. We're happy to have in our program this year a new film, SNCC, about the organization, its history, the people who were involved, many young people who were involved, and their fight and struggle and sometimes victory in the civil rights movement in the United States. We have the director with us, Danny Lyon, and speaking with Danny is his old friend from the movement, Frank Smith. Washingtonians will know Frank Smith as a former city council member. I know him as an old friend. I hope you enjoy this very important conversation.
So Danny, it's Saturday afternoon here in Washington, D.C., and we're going to do this great interview. I haven't seen you in, let's see, when was the last time we saw each other?
We were sitting together at a round table with your family. That's not true. That we sat together. I met your family about 8 years ago, but then when Julian died, I think afterwards we came over to the museum.
Right, right. That's right. We spent a little time together there.
More recent.
Yeah. Now I remember you from what I'm going to call an auspicious beginning. Remember, SNCC sent you over to Holly Springs, and I drove you down to Oxford, Mississippi. Remember that? When the Ole Miss.
I do remember it, and I got some questions now. We're older, we're grandparents. I mean, were you trying to get me killed? What were you? You said some very strange things to me, and I never forgot them. And one of them, you said, "Put on this hat." You Give me a straw hat and said you look more like a cracker. That was one. And then you kind of given me advice. You said, well, if I get in trouble, say I'm a black person.
Right.
And I took that seriously, and that almost got me killed.
So
were you joking? Were you just trying to get rid of me, or what?
I was trying to save your life, man. But I thought you were going to remove something else, because this is how I remember this. SNCC sends you over to Holly Springs. I'm supposed to drive you down to Oxford, Mississippi, because James Meredith is integrated
right.
with you. And the crackers are already rioting. The place is already burning down on fire and stuff. And here I'm supposed to drive a white boy into town in an integrated car, white, black. And I got to the city limits. I said, I don't know how much further I'm going with this. But I remember getting to some point saying, Dan, you got to get out right here. This is as far as I'm going. And you told people, now.
And you made me walk into town. Anything could have happened.
Well, but I could have. I could have been lynched for riding with a white, for driving with a white.
I was going to say how. This was 1962. It was September,
right.
And I think I showed up in Greenwood, and you and Charlie Cobb took me over to Ruleville.
Yeah.
And you guys were staying there, and you said I could sleep there, and you gave me a couch or something, and there were shotgun holes in the wall, and it was right by the window, and that's the first time I thought you tried to get me killed.
Yeah. I wasn't trying to get you killed, man. We were just trying to survive. But listen, you were a brave man. I have to give you credit for that. You were one thing to be black down there, but in these, I think people already realized whenever they saw a black and a white person together, especially a man, they targeted the white man first. So I wasn't surprised in the movie where you all were from the 7th of Montgomery situation there in the movie where I think one of the ladies said that they had targeted James Reed, when he was killed. Remember those photos you made there?
Right.
And the other white person was shot, but Reed was the only one that was killed. But it was a shootout in the daytime. In the middle of
how many? I was going to say. Early, the SNCC was pretty small, like 50, 60 people. Had other white people been down to Ruleville and Greenwood? Do you remember?
Well, we SNCC had this. We always knew, for example, that if a black and a white person showed up together, they were a target.
Right.
And so we had to. But there had been other white people. There was a guy named Larry Rubin there with me in Holly Springs. And
right.
he was such, I used to joke with Larry that that at any time they saw Larry, they arrested him anyway, and they surely would arrest him if they saw the two of us together. So I told Larry,
Right.
I wouldn't travel with him on a Friday because you get put in jail on Friday, you have to stay in jail for the weekend. Nobody could get you out till the judge came and let you out. So I wouldn't even ride around. I wouldn't even ride around with Larry Rubin. We're good friends now. We joke about this all the time. But let me ask you this about let's talk about the movie a little bit more.
Thank you.
I know you were a photojournalist who put yourself in harm's way to make and not, that was your style to sort of go into the situation where you were photographing and then sort of tell the story from the inside. But there was one part of the movie that you talk about that I really liked, when you talked about those girls that were in jail in Southwest Georgia, in prison,
Right.
In a prison
Right.
somewhere.
Leesburg.
Leesburg. Yeah,
Leesburg Stockade.
how did you hear about that? How did they get in there? What was their circumstances? Were they civil rights demonstrators?
Well, that was my big heroic moment in SNCC. Foreman really discovered me. I met him early and he discovered me and he said, "We want you to work for us," which was his great talent. He hired all these people and he said, "We need you." And so he said, "Work for us." And he sent me down to meet you guys. He got some $300 from Harry Belafonte. Said, "Fly to Jackson." But there was skepticism about paying I almost said a white guy, but paying anyone to take pictures. SNCC, they didn't have money. You guys were activists. He did stuff. And Marion Barry in particular objected. He came down from Howard. There was a meeting, and they said, "What do we need him for?" And I thought I'd lose my job. I was very upsetting because I was a kid and I moved there. And Foreman took him in the bathroom and said, "Don't worry, you're all right." And then soon after, he comes to me and said, "There's rumors about these children in jail. Go check it out," which is how they, people just did stuff. They got in cars and said, "Go there." And I went down and that was my big heroic moment. And a kid, a 15-year-old boy, I've been back there many times. There's a historic marker there. But basically, a kid said, "Oh, they're up the road." We met him in a funeral parlor, drugstore, liquor store, the only black business down there. And he said, "They're up the road," and I hid in his car and I snuck into jail. And I took these pictures, but because I did that, and SNCC put them in Jet magazine and in Congress, those girls were released. They were like, one of them was pregnant, one of them was 11 years old. They had been there for 50, 60 days. Their parents didn't know where they were. I mean, They didn't charge them. They'd just been rounded up marching. And so the fact that a photograph actually led to the freedom, it showed that a photograph could really do something. So that was, I think I got accepted by skeptical people.
Yeah. Well, I run the African American Civil War Museum here in Washington, D.C. now, and
I've been there. It's great.
Right, the period when photographs were not very prominent. When we prize any photograph we can get from that period, and but now everybody's got a cell phone and everybody can make photographs. And so, how do you tell me a little bit about that? How does a guy like you, who walked around with a camera around his neck, 4 or 5 cameras all of his life, now everybody has one. So how did you adjust to this new period?
Frank, you guys were doers. You were revolutionaries. You were radicals. But the artists, Charlie Cobb became a great writer. Bernice became a great, enormous force in singing. But at the time, everybody was young, and most of you were activists. And that was the beginning of my life, too. I was lucky to be there. I don't think I was any hero, and I certainly wasn't as courageous as you guys. I left town. In fact, what happened was, I was walking around Green. What had happened was I was in Greenwood. That's where I was told to go. I found you guys. You took me to Ruleville, and I said, "Well, can I film on a plantation?" And then someone said, "Well, they'll probably kill you." And you said, "Well, let's try it once, And we go out there, and I took pictures there. And that's how it was. And then you said, "Let's go to Holly Springs." You took me there. and all the pictures of this really pretty girl. So that's probably why you went there. You remember that girl? She was gorgeous. I have pictures of her. And I'd never seen a black college because I was from the University of Chicago. And I think you were just trying to show me, you know, what's happening down there. You were educating me. So what happened? Oh, yeah. So I'm walking through Greenwood, and I've been walking back and forth. In fact, I got lost. I went to the wrong Magnolia Street, and the cops saw me walking back and forth. And anyway, I was walking around, a cop comes out and says, you know, what are you doing here? And they pulled me into a little police station, which was just like a little cinder block, like a trailer. Well, the guy says, you can't take pictures, so you got to post a $2,000 bond. And I was making jokes, you know, I'm a New Yorker, so you want to check, and all this a lot of bullshit, you know. And I walk outside, and this cop's standing there, he's shaking. He said, what are you doing here? And we don't mix the races here. Gave me a whole lecture on you know, how you act in the South, and I was violating that. So I remembered, I said, wait a second, Frank Smith has prepared me for this moment. I've got training. So I said, because you said, well, just say you're black. That's what you told me. I didn't even try to get me killed. So I said that my grandfather was black.
Right.
But that wasn't what I was supposed to say. And this guy went completely crazy. He said, I'm going to shoot you right here in the parking lot. He started shaking. And it was there. I was scared to death. And I started leaving, and I was praying. Some black kids drove by, and I just jumped in the car. I left town the next day. I was scared to death. And that's when you took me to Oxford.
Well, now, let me ask you about this part. You probably knew this already, too. These people didn't want you taking photographs because they didn't want anybody to know what they were doing. I think they might have been, in their heart and soul, they probably knew they were doing the wrong thing. They probably were embarrassed a little bit. They also knew they were breaking the law. And a photograph could film them, could be evidence of them actually doing these dastardly deeds. And so they probably didn't, that's probably why they didn't want you making those photographs.
And Foreman was a real genius in he wanted things recorded. He wanted testimony. He wanted things written down. He wanted to leave a historical record. And now it's 60 years later. You know what? You know, I was using a negative film, which is not we're in a digital age, right? So every roll of film, there are 36 pictures.
Right.
And I shot like 100 rolls of film. So that's like, you know, it's 3,000 pictures. And 10 pictures became famous and have been seen a lot, but that left 3,000 no one had ever seen. And that's when I made the film out of it. Yeah. And it's great just to see how the girls are dressed, these people in the churches, all these different people. I don't know, did you see that in the film? You see all these places coming to life and faces?
Absolutely, I did. And some of them, I'm 78 years old now. I'll be 79 in the fall. So I'm also seeing in these photographs many people who are dead now, who have who are not alive anymore. They're my friends. All these people that I was, we call it in the fox in Mississippi, like you and I were, and others, and now they're gone. So yes, I saw that part, but also the beauty of it. I mean, the singing is just marvelous. And the variety back and forth with the people, the grace with which they moved, and how they really, I could see how we could all get caught up in the moment.
You know, I'm in terms of an artist, I'm a realist. I only use real things. I don't use actors. And what's powerful in the film, it's not the photograph, it's the audio recordings. And those were made by Alan Ribbeck. Do you remember Alan Ribbeck? He was another Jewish guy, came down from Chicago. He was crippled. He had a terrible limp, probably from polio. And he started bringing down, this was 63. He wired the churches, he brought it. He was just a guy who, like many people, showed up. Julian said, you know, lots of people came through the office. And he did this amazing recordings of these voices. And you're right. I mean, I love Chuck McDee, Foreman. And there they are. You hear their voices at their moment of glory. It's very moving to me. And they're dead.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
And actually, I have to tell you something funny about this. I was, I was in Mississippi, so I was part of the Mississippi group. Bob Moses was he was our guru, and I never paid much attention to Jim Foreman and his speeches and things like that. But he made two of those speeches in your movie are outstanding. I mean, he makes he had a lot more. His voice was a lot more commanding than I ever remember, and his logic was And I'll tell you a funny story about him. You heard him say in the movie that he was from Holly Springs, Mississippi. That's where he was actually born, in Holly Springs.
Really? I knew he had a son and family. He'd spend the summers in the South.
Yeah,
relatives.
Yeah, he had an aunt named Flu Ellen, who was in the north part of Marshall County, just near the Tennessee line, which is where Jim grew up. And so he told me about it. I went to visit her one day. And she had a little garden out there. She had a mule. She was plowing a little garden. And I remember very well because she never stopped. I had to walk with her while I talked to her. And I told her I was Jim Foreman's, working with Jim in the civil rights. And she said his nickname was Spoked. She said, oh, Spoked, he was always very, very handsomely dressed and he wore his little hat and stuff. I said, he's still doing that. And I told Jim about that because I went to visit her. It was his aunt who just told me this. She spoke very highly of it.
Frank, I'm really sincerely touched because, you learned something from that. And SNCC was divided. It was divided between the Foreman group in Atlanta and the Bob Moses group. And Dottie said to me, says, Mississippi, that belongs to Bob. And I was a Foreman guy. I hung out with Foreman. I was all of it. Yeah. And it was political too, but I was crazy about him. And you're absolutely right. As I made this film, and I had interviewed people around '89. There was a reunion at Trinity College. I interviewed John and Julie and people I knew well, and that was all recorded. So that stuff was there, but that stuff was 25 years later. And I kept saying, I wish I could find a recording of James Foreman. And I found, it was like a gold mine. I discovered the archive of these recordings. And this guy, Riback, had left 200 tape recordings made in the South. And there was Foreman. You're right. What a speaker. He was brilliant. Every speech was a history lesson.
Right, absolutely.
And he said, you all laugh and stop laughing back there. And he was educating people. He was educating us. He was educating the masses. And that speech where he talks about the land, he said it was axed from him. He meant taxed.
Yeah.
But they stole the land from his family. Yeah. The whole incredible, jumping off slave ships and drowning in the water. The guy was a genius. And of all the big leaders, he's the least recognized. James.
You're absolutely right about that. And I think that's and I'm just saying this publicly now that I myself I depreciated his but now, his organizing skill, make no mistake about that, he was the organizer of the civil rights. SNCC. He was SNCC's organizer. And that wasn't Bob Moses. It was Jim Foreman who put all these pieces in place. He put the carpool in place. He put in place the public relations stuff together. He brought people like you in to make the photographic images. That was Jim Foreman. That was him. He was the office guy who had a sense of how SNCC should be organized, and he was frustrated that he didn't get us better organized because we were a little anarchists. Yeah. That was a great quality at SNCC. Let me also point out to him because what you and Jim had in common also was you guys had been to the University of Chicago, which was another one of those intellectual centers. Bob Moses was a Harvard man at the University of Chicago. And, I would later end up at the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C., which was organized by guys from the University of Chicago, to Milton Kotler and Mark Baskin. And I think these guys all went to the University of Chicago. So that was a hotbed of and Foreman, I think, was at Roosevelt.
He was at Columbia College. He was a president of Columbia College. He was a veteran. And he was badly beaten in Los Angeles, I was told by Dottie. Yeah. He had mental problems because of this beating.
Well, I think you did. I think that your film, because you, as you said before, you put together, strung together a number of your 3,000 images in this film. That's a sort of it's a history of the civil rights movement, and it's told from the eyes of a photographer, which I think is very, very important. And it's a sort of a new way of looking at art and also looking at history, the way you combine art and history too to make it.
There are problems in the film, but the civil rights movement, the Southern civil rights movement, which is what Julian said you should call it, it was so vast that it was like being in World War II. There's never going to be one history, but SNCC has been forgotten about, and it shouldn't be. It was the point of the spirit. Well, I don't have to tell you that. And I felt that this film was a way to preserve it and pass it down. It doesn't include Black Power. It doesn't include Stokely. It doesn't include a lot of stuff. But I wasn't a witness to that. And there's one line where Julian says, and then the crazies took over. And I know what he's talking about. He's talking about Rap Brown, but he's not talking about Stokely. So it's complicated. But I wanted to tell about the 2 years where I were there and these people I grew to love. And I'm really glad I did that. I'm like you. I hear Madhu talk again. It comes to life. And what an amazing person everybody was back then.
And well, let me just also add one other thing to Danny to this discussion, and that is that the Black Lives Matter movement now is spending a lot of time and effort to try to learn more about SNCC itself, about how we did things and who we were. And I think your movie will contribute greatly to that. And I think I want to join Tony Giddens in what he said earlier about trying to get this distributed nationwide, because I think that will make a big difference to them and to the movement, which is trying to grow out here today to deal with social problems that we left behind. This question of police brutality was always there. The question of African Americans being mistreated was always there as far as sort of what we demonstrated with the violence in Mississippi. But this issue was nationwide, and there's some work being done on it now that's very important. And your work is going to help us get this story out. One of the things that I wanted to get a comment from you on is this. And I start by saying I noticed that your last interview that you did with John Lewis was done with a cell phone, by the way. So I know you know how to use them for recording and also for videoing. But I said also that the Black Lives Matter movement is searching for some similarities and for some instruction and inspiration from SNCC, from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And I think your movie will be instructive to them. And I think this is a good reason for us to do it nationwide if we can get it out there, because I think there are a lot of people out there who are looking to that.
I agree. And because I was editing one a year ago, that's why I made this. I made this for those kids in the street, black and white, and everybody to see this, the kids who are marching now. And I would love to reach them. And I naively thought, oh, Netflix will grab it and all these people will want it, and they all turned it down. Even festivals, it's mind-boggling. And you're absolutely right. Well, maybe we can work it out. Let's see what happens. Let's see what the film, I forgot his name, says to Cody. And that's what I wanted more than anything. I wanted to be part of it, contribute.
Yeah.
I agree with you totally.
Yeah, because you think about what happened even with Floyd. I mean, what George Floyd. I mean, if somebody hadn't been there with a cell phone, photographing all of this, showing a photograph to the world, showing everybody this, we wouldn't have. We don't know where we would be there with that discussion.
Right. So, and it takes a lot of guts to do that. I do it all the time. You see a policeman, he's doing something. You try walking up on them. They turn around on you. They're armed. They're tough. They push you out of the way. So I think it was a young woman did. Very, very courageous. And you do have a right. They're public servants and doing this in public, and everybody should film them. You're absolutely right.
Absolutely. So I think you can expect that you're going to get some interest in this from those young people. The more serious ones of them are trying to figure out how to make sort of parallels between how they organize and how SNCC organized. And because we were what people like to call bottom-up organizers. And I wanted to say that, get that word in here for a minute, and have you respond to that, because we went in we really embedded ourselves in the local communities and lived with them. As you said in your movie, we ate what they ate. We went to church with them. We went to the fields with them. We went to the fields. And so we were, and that was one of the reasons why we were able to survive, because we could, it was hard to pick us out of the crowd because we looked just like everybody else. Except when you showed up down there with your, that's why I was trying to get you dressed up a little bit to make you look a little bit more like a country boy. When I told you to put on a hat and tell people your granddaddy was black. So they
I know, we'll just push this white guy out the door and see if they shoot at him. I would, anyway, I just want to say something about the interview with John. I actually began making a film about John, and I made it about 12 years ago. And John got boring. John was a professional politician. He was a big D Democrat, and he'd repeat these things. And I thought, well, I got to expand it. So I filmed Julian Bond, and I wanted to film other people. And the film changed. And then I did all the stuff with the photographs, and then poor John was stricken. Talk about injustice in life of all the people. He's stricken with a mortal illness. And that last scene, you can see him getting sick in the film. And he'd been losing weight for years. And here's a congressman who's not getting a good medical care. It's mind-boggling. Of all the people, no one did the right thing for him. And that last, it's like a deathbed visit. It wasn't done with a phone. What happened was I went there and I went to say goodbye to him, to see him. And Julian had said, film Dory Lavender. And I took my equipment, my sound equipment and everything, because she's in Washington. And I had it with me. And John is John. I said, how can I just sit here? And I took a picture. And then I started recording with my cell phone. I said, well, this is stupid. I said, John, I got this stuff upstairs. And he says, well, fine. And I get it, and he had a mic on, a radio mic, you can see it. And I lift the camera, and I just fell apart. I just started weeping. And I said, John, I didn't come here to do this. I didn't come here to film you dying. He said, yes, I know that. And then we did this scene where I'm practically sitting on his bed, and I thought, what do you talk to a sick person about? And we talked about his childhood. He had a wonderful childhood. Unlike everyone said, oh, Alabama, that's horrible. He loved being a child in Alabama. He was surrounded by, he had 25 siblings and cousins. They were barefoot. And, that was his life.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, I want to say that I watched the last.
How's the museum? I say something about your museum. How's it going?
We're doing fine. We're expanding into a much larger exhibit now. We have 2 new exhibits coming in. And we use a lot of photographs, photographic images there, which is 1 or 2 of your photographs there that I'm using. And I
was going to say, if you want any more, just send me an email. You'll get it.
I will do that. I remember discussing this with you one time. You and I were on a panel at the Corcoran Gallery here that's now closed years ago.
I love that panel.
You and I, Charlie Cobb, and anybody else? I think Marion Barry.
Foreman showed up. He was... And Foreman showed up.
That's right.
I don't think Marion Barry was on it, but all the Washington people and Foreman came into life. And during that meeting, a woman came out of the audience and said, "I was one of the girls in the Leesburg Stockade when they were 13," and that's the first time I ever met one of those.
Yeah.
And now I know about it.
Yeah.
Well, that was great. That show.
Well, let me just say congratulations to you on your movie. I understand that you and I have to bring this to a close now but I've enjoyed talking to you, and I'm sure the audience knows that you and I are good friends. They probably picked this up now. We've been friends for a long time and have a lot of war stories together. And we both blessed. I was at John Lewis's. I was one of 6 SNCC people that were invited to the Rotunda at the Capitol to see John's
right
at the end of his visit here to the nation's capital. And he was a good friend of mine, and we loved him to death. And my wife, at the time, Jean and I, we went down, voted for him in that famous meeting you were talking about, where they came, where the vote got changed in the middle of the night. We were the last 2 voting yes for John for that time. So he was always my friend, and we always think fondly of him. He was the heart of the movement, not just a spokesman. He was the heart of the civil rights movement. So,
yeah, I miss him, and you know, we spoke every couple of weeks. I called. We're still here, Frank.
Yeah.
And Dottie's still here, and I'm glad the girls are here, and it's great to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. And we'll find a way to show you the movie when it gets on Netflix or something like that. We'll find a way to show it at the African American Civil War Museum. You're a great place to show it.
Yeah, you should have it there. Okay, take care.
Have a theater.
Adios. Thanks a million, Frank.
Right,
say hi to everybody.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks to Tony and Amy for letting me do this interview. It's been a great interview for me.
Right.
Thank you very much.